You know that land you inherited from your grandfather? I sold it to Harper for $50. My mother's single sentence froze my entire world in an instant. $50. The land for which I had paid the property taxes every single year for the past 10 years, and into which I had invested in surveys and soil testing. The land where my husband Mason and I had reworked the plans dozens of times to build a home for our children, our dream place, was worth only that? The beginning of everything was just a few hours earlier, during what had seemed like a picture-perfect Thanksgiving dinner. Mom, this is the best dinner ever. I smiled at my mother as I stood beside my father, who was carving the perfectly roasted turkey. The table was filled with dishes prepared just for this day, and the fire in the fireplace cast a warm glow over the room. No one yet knew that this peaceful moment was merely the calm before the storm. Yes, it truly is. Having everyone together is what makes it perfect. My mother said that with a smile, but for a moment that smile seemed to flicker with a shadow. The dining table was wrapped in a warm, friendly atmosphere, but I did not miss my mother exchanging a meaningful glance with my sister Harper, who sat beside her. Something was wrong. A small alarm began ringing in the corner of my mind. The children had finished their pumpkin pie early and were already watching an animated movie in the living room. Mason was refilling everyone's glasses with red wine, and just as I put my fork into my pie, it happened. My father cleared his throat and set down his fork. The atmosphere in the room shifted sharply. I have some wonderful news for all of you today. News? Mason asked back. My father nodded with satisfaction and looked toward Harper. It's about Harper. She's going to start a new business, and as her family, we want to support her new beginning. My mother continued. Haley, do you remember the 2-acre piece of land you inherited from your grandfather? We decided to give that land to Harper. For an instant, I couldn't understand what she was saying. My hand holding the wine glass froze. Give it to her? What do you mean? My voice was so thin and cold that it surprised even me. To be precise, we sold it. My mother said this without the slightest hint of guilt. Harper is going through a lot, so it's just symbolic. $50. Wait, are you serious? I've been paying the taxes on that land myself for the last 10 years. We talked over and over about building our house there. Harper cut in with irritation. You don't have to build your house on that land. You and Mason run a great company, and you're not struggling with money at all. I'm different. I need that land. A family should help each other when someone is in trouble, shouldn't they? My father's words pulled the trigger. The anger I had barely managed to suppress until then rushed through my entire body like a broken dam. I set the fork I was holding onto the plate with a sharp clatter. Help each other? Do you really believe this is what it's about? Placing both hands on the table, I glared at each of my family members one by one. That land was something Grandpa left to me. And you think selling it behind my back without a single word to me is helping? And for only $50? Don't be ridiculous. At my outburst, my mother screamed hysterically, How dare you speak like that? Harper's eyes were teary as she snapped at me. You're rich and still so stingy. Not one of them tried to reflect on what they had done. It's not about money. It's about trust. You trampled not only on my dream but on Grandpa's wishes as well. Grandpa would have said you should help your family when they're in need. I was stunned hearing my father's one-sided words. It's useless. Nothing I say will ever reach these people. The heat in my head cooled in an instant. I quietly rose from my chair. Enough. Now I truly understand what kind of people you all are. My voice was eerily calm, devoid of any trace of emotion. The lavish dinner left on the table looked nothing more than bitter remnants. Mason, we're leaving. Get the kids ready. I turned my back and spoke only to my husband. I did not look back at the family who stared at me as if frozen in place. The Thanksgiving dinner came to an end in the worst possible way. The car ride home was wrapped in a heavy silence. From the back seat, the only sound was the gentle breathing of our children, who had fallen asleep in exhaustion. Mason quietly placed his hand over the fist I had been clenching. Haley, are you okay? His gentle voice loosened the tension inside me just a little. No, I'm not okay. I'm not going to let it end like this. I said this with a quiet fury, still facing forward. The city lights streaming past the window blurred before my eyes. Mason. I took a breath, strengthening my resolve. Do you remember when we bought that gravel road leading to the land because Dad and Mom were acting strange 2 years ago? Yeah, of course I remember. Mason nodded. You said it was just in case. Maybe you were right back then. Yes, I nodded. That will be our first trump card. When we arrived home and put the children to bed, I headed straight to the study. From my phone's contacts, I searched for a certain name. After 3 rings, a calm voice answered. Hello? Brooklyn, I'm sorry to call so late. It's Haley. Haley, what's going on Thanksgiving night? Did something happen? Brooklyn has been my best friend since college. A few years ago, when Mason and I founded our design firm, me as an interior designer and Mason as an architect, I asked her as a lawyer to support us. Now she is our company's trusted legal advisor. There was tension in Brooklyn's voice. Yes, and in the worst way. The time has finally come. I told Brooklyn everything that had happened at the Thanksgiving gathering. My parents' betrayal, Harper's demands, and the insulting price of $50. Brooklyn listened to everything in silence and then spoke calmly and firmly. It's the worst-case scenario among the possibilities I imagined. But stay calm, Haley. You're not alone. I'll check the title records first thing tomorrow morning. I nodded quietly at her words. Around that time, Harper was probably smiling at her phone screen. A new post had appeared on her Instagram, alongside a cheerful caption, starting a new business, making my dream come true in the best location. #Airbnb, #girlboss, #loving nature, was a photo of that land. In the comments, ignorant of the situation, her friends wrote innocent congratulations, like, congrats. The next day, Brooklyn contacted me as promised. Her voice was calm and filled with certainty, completely different from last night. Haley, just as expected, the land is still jointly owned by you and your father. Without your notarized signature, any sales contract they claim to have made is nothing more than a piece of scrap paper. Legally, it means absolutely nothing. I felt relief wash over me at Brooklyn's report. I see. Thank you. What should we do next? This situation works overwhelmingly in our favor. As for our next move, I'll send a certified letter to clearly state our position. We will notify them that the sales contract is invalid, and that the private road leading to the land is solely owned by you and unauthorized passage is prohibited. That will be our first jab. Give me a few days to prepare. Yes, please do. I won't hold back anymore. Brooklyn responded firmly to my resolve. All right. By the way, I checked Harper's Instagram. That could serve as undeniable evidence of unlicensed business activity, so I'll preserve everything. You don't need to worry about anything. Just stand tall. A week had passed since Thanksgiving when my phone rang. It was Brooklyn. Everything is ready, Haley. I have sent the certified letters to your parents and Harper's addresses. They should arrive by tomorrow. Thank you, Brooklyn. This is finally the starting line. Yes, the ball is in their court now. Let's see how they react. The following afternoon, my mother called with a frantic, almost desperate force. The moment I answered, a piercing scream hit my ears. Haley, what on earth are you thinking? We got a letter from a lawyer. Are you planning to sue us? There shouldn't be a single word about suing, Mom. We simply notified you of the legal facts. I replied calmly. Legal facts? It says things like the sales contract is invalid and the ownership of the access road belongs to Haley. All this nonsense. This is intimidation. From the other end, I could hear my father's panicked voice. Calm down for a moment. How am I supposed to calm down? My mother screamed. We're family, aren't we? And yet you treat us like strangers. You're the ones who started treating me like a stranger. My mother was left speechless at my cold remark. In that moment of silence, Harper's voice suddenly burst in from the other end of the line. You're so mean, Haley. Do you hate seeing me happy that much? I've already taken the reservation money. What am I supposed to do now? Reservation money? So Brooklyn was right. She had already acted on her plan. Harper, do you even understand what you're doing? Did you get the proper permits for that business plan? Shut up. It has nothing to do with you. Just withdraw that stupid letter right now. If you don't, I'll cut ties with the family. She hung up the phone violently after screaming her ultimatum. I let out a long breath and immediately called Brooklyn. Just as we expected, And we got something important: reservation money. Harper is already collecting payments. She is? That could qualify as a serious act of fraud. I bit my lip at her words. Harper was already stepping over the line of the law. Did she even understand the weight of the crimes she was starting to commit? For the next few days, there was no contact at all from my parents or Harper, and an eerie silence settled in, as if the calm before a storm. But there was no way they had given up. While staying in touch with Brooklyn, we carefully watched for their next move. A few days after sending the certified letter, Brooklyn sent me a video file. "Haley, look, this was recorded this morning." When I opened the file, the familiar entrance to the gravel road came into view. There, a pickup truck driven by Harper's boyfriend appeared, ignoring the warning signs as it entered the property. In the truck bed were stakes and ropes, construction materials. Harper was in the passenger seat. Unbelievable. They're completely ignoring the warning. Beside me, Mason stared at the screen with a grim expression. "Yeah, this is clear trespassing. It's undeniable evidence. Brooklyn was right. Installing that camera just in case was the right move." "Yes, but still, they would actually go this far?" My voice trembled with anger. They decided to ignore a formal warning from a lawyer and act like the land is theirs? I'm honestly shocked beyond words. Seeing Harper strutting around confidently on the screen filled me not just with anger, but with a deep sense of contempt. This wasn't a family issue anymore. It was simply a crime. I will never forgive this. Glaring at the screen, I made that vow with absolute conviction. Mason gently wrapped his hand around my clenched fist. There was no hesitation left in me. If they chose that path, then we would simply fight back with everything we had. My anger wasn't just about losing the land. After my grandmother passed away, neither my father, nor my mother, nor Harper ever bothered to visit my grandfather living alone in that house. The only ones who visited him every weekend, kept him company, and helped maintain the garden were Mason and me. "Haley, I want to entrust this house and land to you." Sitting with me on the sunlit porch, my grandfather had said that many times as he held my hand. I would never allow their selfish desires to defile that warm promise and my grandfather's wishes. Even so, why had Harper become so desperate? Despite flaunting a glamorous life on social media, she was willing to drag the whole family into this fight just to get the land. Her obsession felt unnaturally intense. When I told Brooklyn about that small sense of unease, she immediately started investigating. A few days later, what she discovered was far worse than I had imagined. Harper had been living with her gambling-addicted boyfriend, drowning in the massive debts he had accumulated and struggling to cover their daily expenses. To her, that land was not a place to fulfill her Airbnb dream, but her last trump card, something she could convert into quick cash. My hand tightened around my phone. We could have filed a lawsuit immediately, but before doing that, I believed they needed to face reality. Just once. They had to understand how reckless and illegal their actions truly were. "Come to the lawyer's office this Saturday at 10 in the morning," I told my father on the phone in a tone that allowed no refusal. "Brooklyn will be present as well. Harper and her boyfriend must come with you. This is the last opportunity for us to communicate our demands directly. If we cannot resolve things here, the next step will be a formal lawsuit. Tell them this is the final notice." On the appointed day, the meeting room was filled with an icy tension. Mason, Brooklyn, and I sat on one side, while across from us were my parents with stiff expressions, a sulking Harper, and her boyfriend sitting with his arms crossed, glaring at us in an intimidating manner. Brooklyn placed the stack of documents she had prepared on the table and began calmly. "Let me be blunt. The sales contract you attempted to execute for the land is legally invalid. The land is jointly owned by Haley and her father, and any contract without Haley's signature is nothing more than a worthless piece of paper." "That can't be." My father growled as he glared at Brooklyn. Beside him, my mother tugged anxiously at his sleeve, her face pale. "Darling, didn't you say you checked everything? You told me there wouldn't be any problem even without Haley's permission." Her trembling voice was laced with unmistakable blame. You could see the panic spreading between them as they realized just how poorly planned their scheme had been. Brooklyn pressed on. "Furthermore, regarding the Airbnb business Harper intends to run, operating without a permit and collecting reservation money in advance may constitute fraud. And please look at the surveillance footage. This is clear evidence of trespassing." When Brooklyn turned the laptop screen toward them, Harper gasped at the sight of herself on the video. But her boyfriend scoffed. So what? You're the one being ridiculous by dragging a lawyer into a family matter. You're wealthy anyway. Giving Harper a piece of land or two shouldn't matter to you. I spoke quietly at his arrogant words. Very well. Then let's talk about this as a business matter. If you want to use that land, you will need the right to pass through the private road, which is the only access route. We are willing to sell that access right to you for $69,000, payment in full. $69,000? Harper shrieked. It's just a gravel road. Don't be stupid. You're the ones being stupid. I looked Harper straight in the eye. I don't want to hear that from people who tried to steal my 10 years of work and Grandpa's promise for $50. The discussion collapsed completely. They refused to acknowledge their wrongdoing until the very end, and instead began insulting me, calling me cold and greedy. That will be enough. I stood up quietly. Any further discussion is meaningless. Brooklyn, proceed as planned. Brooklyn nodded and said in a chillingly steady voice, All right, then everyone, we will see you in court. That sentence seemed to sever the last threads of their self-control. My father slammed the table and shouted, Don't you dare! This is ridiculous! My mother collapsed into tears as she began pleading with me. Haley, please think this through. We're family, aren't we? Harper shrieked, hurling insults at me. You're the worst! I said nothing more and turned my back on them. Mason placed a hand on my shoulder and we walked together toward the exit. Their screams and sobs pierced my back, but my heart was strangely calm. The following week, Brooklyn officially filed the complaint with the district court. The claims included confirmation of land ownership, a petition for division of co-owned property, and a damages claim against Harper and her boyfriend for trespassing. The true legal battle had begun. News of the lawsuit spread through our relatives almost instantly. It was the result of my parents and Harper presenting themselves as victims, selectively weaving a narrative that favored them. Aunts and uncles called me one after another to criticize me. Suing your own parents and sister? Something is wrong with you. If you would just compromise a little, everything would be resolved peacefully. None of them cared about the taxes I had paid for 10 years. To them, I was nothing more than a cold, successful woman who disrupts family harmony. Pay them no mind, Haley. Brooklyn said this while flipping through a mountain of documents. They're speaking from emotion. We will speak only with facts in court. A few weeks later, a written answer arrived from the opposing side's attorney. The contents were so absurd they made me feel more stunned than angry. It claimed that Harper had sought business advice from her kind older sister, Haley, only for Haley to refuse help out of jealousy and impose unreasonable demands. As for my parents, they even asserted that, due to their advanced age and declining judgment, it is possible that Haley manipulated them into setting the land as joint ownership through cunning persuasion. This is awful. It's practically fiction. Mason muttered that bitterly as he held my shoulder. Yeah, but this is their strategy. They're trying to paint us as villains and gain the judge's sympathy. I analyzed things calmly. But emotional stories are powerless in front of objective evidence. From there, our real counterattack began. Following the discovery procedure, Brooklyn began revealing our evidence one card at a time. First, the certified copy of the title deed clearly listing my father's and my names. Next, 10 years' worth of property tax payment certificates and a stack of receipts showing the costs of surveys and soil inspections. Then, multiple files of surveillance footage, each with timestamps, showing Harper and her boyfriend trespassing. Brooklyn also sent screenshots of Harper's Instagram post about receiving reservation money, as well as a credit report proving that her boyfriend had taken out loans from several consumer finance companies. The opposing law firm fell silent. They were likely overwhelmed by the difference between the story their clients had told them and the facts we presented. Before we knew it, the day of the trial arrived. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense. As expected, the defense attorney chose a strategy that appealed to emotion, calling my mother as their first witness. With tears streaming down her face, my mother described me as a cold daughter who became successful and stopped caring about her family, and Harper as a poor sister whose dreams were crushed by her jealous sibling. Relatives in the gallery began crying, and for a moment it felt as if the entire courtroom had turned against me. A cold unease wrapped around my heart. But that mood was shattered by Brooklyn's calm cross-examination. "Ma'am," Brooklyn spoke gently, but her eyes were sharp as she looked at my mother. "Let me confirm a few facts. Were you aware that Harper was carrying $90,000 in debt caused by her partner's gambling?" "What?" My mother's eyes widened. "That's—" "And were you aware that Harper had already collected tens of thousands of dollars in reservation fees for her planned Airbnb business, despite having no permits and therefore conducting illegal operations?" The color drained rapidly from my mother's face. She couldn't answer. Her trembling lips repeated only, "I don't know." Brooklyn turned toward the judge and presented the final brief. "Your Honor, the defendant's claims are nothing but fabrications and emotional appeals. In contrast, please review the evidence we have submitted. 10 years of property tax payments, substantial receipts proving investment into the land, and clear footage of the defendant's trespassing. The facts are undeniable. The plaintiff, Haley, is the rightful heir who honored her grandfather's wishes and has lawfully and faithfully protected the land." When Brooklyn finished her powerful argument, the courtroom fell completely silent. The judge looked between the mountain of objective evidence and the now speechless mother and Harper, then finally opened his mouth with gravity. "I will now deliver the verdict." His voice rang through the courtroom like a gong announcing the end of our long battle. "The sales contract claimed by the defendants is recognized as invalid due to the lack of consent from the plaintiff, Haley. The ownership of the land in question is recognized as belonging to the plaintiff, Haley." The judge's calm reading of the verdict announced our complete victory. Furthermore, the court ordered my father to sell his co-ownership share to me at a fair market price and ordered Harper and her boyfriend to pay damages for trespassing. When the court declared the session adjourned, my mother and Harper broke down in tears, and the relatives in the gallery lowered their heads awkwardly before hurriedly leaving the courtroom. Mason, Brooklyn, and I exchanged firm handshakes and quietly left the room. There were no words left to say to those people. Several weeks after the verdict, on a cold, rainy afternoon, my parents came to my design office together. Gone was the dignity and resilience they once carried. They looked painfully small, crushed by the weight of the courtroom's reality. My father, sinking deeply into the sofa in the reception room, spoke in a strained voice. "Haley, I am truly sorry." Beside him, my mother, her face wet with tears, lifted her head and said, "We were not ourselves. We didn't think about your feelings at all. We are so, so sorry." According to my father, Harper had finally realized the magnitude of her wrongdoing and was spending her days in regret and self-reproach. While looking out at the gray cityscape beyond the window, I answered quietly, "I accept your apology. But Dad, Mom, trust is like glass. Once it shatters, it can never return to what it was." They said nothing. They could not even lift their heads. That was my final answer to the people I once called family. Years later, on that land stood the home Mason and I had dreamed of, a house filled with light. Through the large windows overlooking the forest, I could hear the laughter of our children running in the garden. This home, filled with every detail I insisted on as an interior designer, was the embodiment of our happiness. Meanwhile, my parents had begun to suffer from poor health, worn down by stress. When the truth came to light during the trial, the relatives who once sided with them and criticized me turned away from them as quickly as changing a mask. My parents faced not only legal defeat, but the harsh reality of being isolated from the community. An aunt told me that my mother, who once loved hosting parties, hardly leaves the house anymore. Harper ended up bearing not only the damages, but also the gambling debts that had belonged to her boyfriend. When the trial destroyed everything, her once arrogant boyfriend disappeared somewhere, fleeing debt collectors, leaving all legal responsibility on Harper as the joint tortfeasor. I heard through the grapevine that she now works day and night at multiple part-time jobs. Her dream of becoming an Airbnb owner on that beautiful piece of land had literally evaporated into nothing. Sitting on the porch's rocking chair, I took a sip of hot coffee. I live peacefully with my family today on this land my grandfather entrusted to me. I no longer look back on the past. My future is here, with this home I love and with the husband and children who believed in me and fought beside me through everything. Justice, at times, arrives quietly and inexorably, and here in this place, I will continue to prove that.